All right, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Holly Caratanudo. I am the Sexual Assault Outreach Coordinator with Palm Beach County Victim Services. Palm Beach County Victim Services is the only certified rape crisis center in Palm Beach County. We provide free services to victims of crime, including sexual assault, human trafficking, domestic and dating violence, stalking, and surviving family members of DUI fatalities and homicides. We are also one of the partners of the Palm Beach County Human Trafficking Task Force. There's been a lot of attention lately on social media to child sex trafficking, which is great because it brings much needed attention to the cause. But we also must remember that human trafficking victims can be adults, children, domestic and foreign born citizens, and can be victimized through labor and sex trafficking. Today, we are focusing on trafficking involving teenagers ages 12 to 18, and this can involve sex and labor trafficking. But we want to ensure that all victims feel heard and that they know that they can receive services through victim services or through the task force, no matter what their age is or what their current status is. So just quickly, we're not going to go too much into the basics of human trafficking, but the federal definition of human trafficking does say there's two different parts. Sex trafficking is a commercial sex act induced by force, fraud, or coercion, or in which a person is induced to perform such act has not attained 18 years of age. The other part is the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a person for labor or services through the use of force, fraud, or coercion for the purpose or subjection to involuntary servitude, peonage, debt bondage, or slavery. That's a whole lot of words, right? So what does that actually mean? Human trafficking is a crime, and it's a crime that involves exploiting a person for labor, services, or commercial sex. It is a crime against a person, not a place, or not a border. It can happen in one location, or it can happen over many locations. It can happen only one time, or it can happen many times over. If you want to learn more about the basics of human trafficking, I think we all on this panel would agree that the National Human Trafficking Hotline and the Polaris Project are the most up-to-date information and have the most accurate data about trafficking currently happening in the United States. Additionally, there's some other resources we posted today on the Palm Beach County Victim Services Facebook page, some red flags that came from the love146.org page, which I will make sure I put links to this in the chat box. Love 146 focuses on prevention education and has an aftercare program. The other, Callie's going to talk about her book in a little bit. That's one of my favorite books right here. But another one of my favorite books is by Rachel Lloyd. She's probably the most famous survivor activist in the United States, and this is her book, Girls Like Us. If you want to know about sex trafficking among young girls in the United States happening right here in our community as well, I think this is the best book to read. She does a great job explaining all the different layers of it. I got to see her speak at Nova University about a year and a half ago. So this is actually my signed copy of the book. One of my favorite quotes by her, she really focuses on the fact that sometimes we think that sex trafficking victims look a certain way, but we need to recognize that our most vulnerable populations tend to be our individuals of color, tend to be our LGBTQ population, not because of the color of their skin or because of their sexual identity, but more so because of their vulnerabilities, like ending up homeless, sexual abuse history, their social economic status. My favorite quote from her is that if we are going to address trafficking in our country, we have to address poverty, racism, and gender-based violence. So that's a little introduction to human trafficking. Like I said, these are great resources for you. Right now, we're going to move into introducing the wonderful panelists that are joining me today. So we're going to start with Yvonne from Catholic Charities.
Hi, my name's Yvonne. I'm a case manager at Catholic Charities. I work for the Vaquita Empowerment Program. We help to fight human trafficking here, and we've just started working with human traffic victims that are also refugees. And we work together with the task force here in Palm Beach County. We have the OVC Collaborative Grant, which allows law enforcement to work with us. They look for the traffickers. They provide legal services for the trafficker, for the victims, and we provide victim services and case management for human trafficking victims. So that's what we do here.
Awesome, thank you. All right, next we have Laura, who is from Silo, and she's also the Human Trafficking Coalition of the Palm Beach president.
Still muted.
Can you hear me? Sorry, I was muted. My name is Laura, and I work for the Coalition for Independent Living Options, or SILO. We're based in Palm Beach County, but we also serve up on the Treasure Coast. And we work with people who are victims of some kind of crime and have a disability, but that we include trauma in that kind of category. And so we serve victims of all types of crime, but including those who have been trafficked for sex, labor trafficking. And then we provide services, whether it's financial assistance, advocacy, maybe educational advocacy, help finding housing, helping with job skills, a whole array of services. And then I also, like Holly said, serve as president of the Human Trafficking Coalition in Palm Beach, which I think later we'll talk about more like what they do and what that is. So I'll save that.
Great, thank you, Laura. Next up, we have Callie, who is a survivor activist, and just getting to know Callie over the past 2 years, it's been amazing to see her journey from survivor to thriver. So Callie's going to give you a little introduction to herself.
Thank you so much, Holly. So yeah, my name is Callie. I am a survivor of child sex trafficking as well as labor trafficking. I've been out of that lifestyle, as we call it, for the past 5 years, and it has definitely been a journey and a half, and I know that's something that we're going to talk about later on. But right now I am serving and have been serving for the past year on the board of the Broward Human Trafficking Coalition as their survivor advocate. And as Holly did say, I did just recently publish my first book, and hopefully not my last.
Thanks, Callie. And you'll have to sign my book once we get over this social distancing quarantine. All right, next up, we have Norma, who is one of our amazing therapists at Palm Beach County Victim Services.
Hello, well, I'm Norma Sencio. I'm also bilingual, so I get to serve a lot of the Hispanic community. I'm a licensed mental health counselor. I've been working for victim services for about 16 years, and I work with all victims of crime, domestic assault, sexual assault, homicide, and general crime. So it's been very interesting working with a lot of people from different cultures and being able to understand their culture, and especially the Hispanics that are a lot of them are labor workers that have been also abused a lot in human trafficking.
Great, thank you. All right, so we're going to start off this discussion. I have questions for each of our panelists, but please, if you have a question, you can enter it at the chat at any time. Let us know who you want to ask the question to, or if it's just a general question for everyone. So I'm going to start with a question for Laura. Can you explain the difference? I mentioned it in the federal definition, the difference between child versus adult sex trafficking. Laura, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Sorry. Yes, I think this is a great question, because sometimes I think young people are afraid to come forward when they've experienced trafficking, because they're afraid that they'll get in trouble or be blamed for what happened. And sometimes that's something that a trafficker will, convince them that, they're responsible for that. It's their fault. So it's really important to know that someone who abuses or traffics you, that it's not your fault. And I'm thankful that our laws really reflect that and kind of protect those that are under 18. So the laws say if you're under 18, you cannot consent to being trafficked or, prostituted, as some people call it. And what does consent mean? So it means to agree to or give permission for something. So by law, if you're under 18, you can maybe verbally say, yes, this is what I want to do, but by law, you're not recognized, that you cannot be held responsible for that. And so that allows us to kind of identify people who have been trafficked, get them services, see them as victims, and really work to, empower them and hopefully get them out of the situation. So what that means is if someone is under the age of 18 and a trafficker, trades me in exchange for food. It doesn't have to be money. It could be for a place to stay, for shelter. I will be recognized as a victim of trafficking. And there was just a case recently out of, I believe it was Miami. I just want to share for a second, where a 14-year-old got into an argument with her parents, ran away from home. Her friend actually introduced her to another person who ended up being a trafficker. And he coached her and told her how to essentially prostitute herself, is kind of the language that was used. And by saying that, I think it kind of gave the impression that she was doing this to herself, but keep in mind she was only 14. So again, the law would have seen her not as someone who was prostituting herself or trafficking herself, but somebody who was being trafficked and that she was a victim. And in the end, he taught her what to do. He took her money. He controlled where she was living. And that was just another minor that was actually facilitating that trafficking of another, minor that she met through a friend. So I think that's really important to know that if you're in a similar situation, if this happened to you, if it is happening to you or someone you know, there are people who want to help, who believe you, who will recognize you as a victim, because that's what the law says. And that's kind of the main difference. If you're over 18, we have to show evidence of either force, fraud, and coercion, or lies, threats, ways that someone has maybe forced you into that. But if you're under 18, you're recognized as a victim of human trafficking.
Thanks, Lauren. That's a great point about a peer trafficking a friend. We have to remember that there's this misconception that traffickers are like these older men. And yes, sometimes they are, but not always. Often it's, someone close in age to the victim. So when parents are looking for red flags with their children, or friends are seeing, red flags with their friends, just because someone's close in age with them doesn't mean that they can't traffic them. That's a great point. All right, Yvonne, when survivors are identified in Palm Beach County, how are they reporting that they were recruited by their trafficker?
When they're identified, sometimes they call the police, but not always. Sometimes they just tell their friends, and many times it'll be family members, it'll be friends that will report. Other times they'll go into churches, the churches will report. Sometimes they'll go into hospitals for treatment for, let's say, mental health, or they'll go to a provider for any reason. They'll go to a hospital for treatment for substance abuse, and these providers will report the trafficking once they've dug deep enough to be able to identify that this is a human traffic victim. So I think there's many routes to be able to report. I think the number one thing to remember is just not to stay quiet, and to find one of those routes. And one thing I always tell people is, aside from not staying quiet, is call the National Human Trafficking Hotline, because they'll do a full assessment, and they'll refer your friend, your family member, the person that you suspect that is being trafficked, to the appropriate area, the appropriate provider, all sorts of services, the appropriate hospital. They'll put the referral right where it has to be placed through. And I would just say, just not stay quiet.
That's great advice. And you also reminded me that I didn't give the phone number for the National Human Trafficking Hotline. And I think, we all talk about it so often that we think everybody knows that number. But the phone number for the National Human Trafficking Hotline is 888-373-7888. More simply, it's 888-373-7888. So that phone number, as service providers and working in this field, I think we all know it, but we want to make sure that people that aren't aware know that they can call that number at any time. You can also go to the National Human Trafficking Hotline website and report online as well. So if people don't feel comfortable picking up the phone, and I think they even have a text number now that you can text to as well.
Yes.
So thank you for that reminder. That's very important. Yeah. Great. All right, Norma, teenagers, they often don't realize that they are being exploited by a trafficker. Can you briefly talk about the trauma bond between a trafficker and a victim?
Okay, so trauma bond refers to the state of being emotionally attached to an abuser. So the abuser uses a cycle of abuse and then some form of reward to keep the victim trapped psychologically and emotionally. So the traffickers are abusers who are looking for a prey or looking for signs that they can find the victim. So the victim could be, they're looking for weaknesses, they're looking for unfamiliar and inexperienced people, especially with the teenagers. They're looking for that void that the teenagers might have, maybe get come from a domestic violence situation at home. So they feel lonely, they feel unloved. So they're going to know that these are things that they want. So therefore, they're going to offer them love, they're going to offer them money, they're going to offer them what they are needing. So that will trap them. And once they're trapped, of course, they're going to show the other side of them because it's part of the cycle of abuse, where they're going to abuse them verbally, sometimes physically, threatening them. But then they're going to give them the love that they want. So the love is like it's something, a reward that constantly is going to be giving them to keep them there. So they get very confused. They feel that the trafficker loves them, really loves them because they show love. And then on the other side, they think that maybe he's going to change, he's going to be nice, and he's going to marry me. So these are part of the cycle that leads that traps them. And because they're teenagers, they still don't think straight. They still have fantasies, and they believe in anything. They're very innocent, very naive. In the case of the people that are from other countries that don't speak the language, sometimes it's promises of a new world or something that they never seen before. So they really look forward to something that they always hear about. So, and sometimes the language is a barrier, so they believe whatever they hear in the little bit of the language that they can give them. So it's a cycle, and sometimes it can stay there for a long time, sometimes it'll be short, but it's every individual, every teenager is different, every adult is different. So all depends on how many weaknesses they have and how many things the abuser will use to trap them.
Yeah, I usually compare it to the cycle of abuse that's similar to domestic violence. You see that, abuse 1 minute and then love the next. And so they think, I'm going to leave this person, but then they show them so much love the next minute. They think, oh, they're going to change. And it's constantly, it's psychological abuse. And I think that sometimes we minimize psychological abuse and we think that we only think of that force aspect of trafficking. And we forget that sometimes that psychological abuse can be stronger than physical abuse and can really pull people into that relationship. So that's a great point. And I want, again, teenagers and parents to understand that you might not see bruises, you might not see, physical signs of this trafficking happening. But if you begin to see that your young person in your life is isolating from all their friends and only spending time with this one person, this person doesn't allow them to maybe speak to their friends anymore. Those are some of the red flags, those psychological flags that we should be aware of. All right, Laura, so with the Human Trafficking Coalition of the Palm Beaches, they have a curriculum for schools. If you could break down 2 to 3 highlights for parents and teens to know about trafficking from that curriculum, what would it be?
Absolutely. So really what we kind of focus on is the prevention side of it. You've got the task force and other groups that are really working on helping survivors once they get out of the trafficking situation. But we're trying to equip parents and young people to not even have to go down that path in the first place. And so number one would be that traffickers prey on vulnerabilities. And we talk about this when we do our youth presentations and with our, even as adults, with parents. One thing to really keep in mind is that it's really important to help our kids identify their vulnerabilities. We all have them. It's a part of being human, but we need to identify and be aware of them and how someone could exploit them. So once we know that these are my vulnerabilities and kind of talk through how we might be able to protect ourselves from someone who is maybe wanting to take advantage of that, that makes us a harder target or makes our kids a harder target for a trafficker. For the teenagers right now, I know you're spending a lot of time online, whether it's for school or for fun or just texting, whatever. Be aware, again, of how you might be vulnerable online. And as parents, we can talk through like online safety and the importance of being aware of the information. Sometimes we give information away that we don't even realize just indirectly through online. The second takeaway, I would say, as you saw with that case I mentioned with the 14-year-old down in Miami, and as Holly mentioned, anyone can be a trafficker. And so that includes other young people. So if someone makes you feel uncomfortable or you observe something either in person or online that makes you feel uncomfortable, make sure you talk to a trusted adult because they probably did that same thing or requested that same thing from another person online. So we want to make sure that we make this world a safer place for everyone. So talk to a trusted adult. They will be able to kind of navigate and get you in touch with the right person to get help. Even if they say that they're your friend, they can still have other motives and put you in risky situations. And then lastly, this can happen to girls and boys. I know a lot of times we talk about girl victims, and it's not just sex trafficking. We also see teens being recruited for labor trafficking, where they're forced to work in some way. This could look like being forced to sell drugs or sell items door to door, or even, you see sometimes teenagers like at stoplights selling things. So in those cases, often the youth have to pay fees, and all or some of their money, a lot of their money is taken away. And when they try to leave, they're threatened or they're actually harmed and met with violence of some kind. So just kind of keep an open mind. Don't just think or zero in on sex trafficking and girls, that we have guys being trafficked for sex as well. We have girls being trafficked for labor. We see it all different ages and demographics. So this truly is something that, we think maybe couldn't happen to us, but the more you learn about the issue and explore those vulnerabilities, the more you might start to see that, areas where maybe our kids could be at risk for this happening, whether it's in person or online.
Yeah, it wasn't until I started actually doing presentations about trafficking that I learned how prevalent it is for kids to be involved in the candy sales where they're selling candy in the neighborhood, or even like you said, collecting donations on a street corner, but really they're giving that money back to their trafficker, and they're not allowed to keep any of that. So I think those are great points. And if a parent or a school is watching this right now and they want to bring the curriculum that the Human Trafficking Coalition has to their school, how do they make that connection?
Absolutely. So we're doing virtual presentations right now. So all you have to do is just email us at info@htcpb.org or reach out to me, but that's the most direct way. And bring us in. We do them virtually, so we can kind of go anywhere, anytime. If you just have a group of neighborhood kids you want to get together, or a small group, whether it's in a school or outside of that, church, religious center, whatever, let us know and we can set that up. And we can also do education for just parents on online safety and kind of help you, equip you on what to be looking for right now with the virtual kind of world taking place right now during COVID, and but also able to talk to youth directly as well.
Great, thank you. All right, Kelly, I probably have asked you this question before because it's the question that I always ask survivors because I'm so desperate to know. But if I or another service provider had come across you while you were being exploited and you were in that life, what is something that a service provider could have said to you or done to let you know that we were someone you could trust and that you would actually come and utilize our services?
That's an amazing question, and I think we have to also, take acknowledgement of the age of the person. And so for me, I was being trafficked from when I was 7 to 17, and so approaching me about an issue like this is much different than if I'm right now I'm 23. If I'm 23 being trafficked, but as a minor going through that, I think one of the most important ways that you could meet somebody where they're at is just by saying, hey, like, what are basic needs that you are lacking that I can give you? Are you hungry tonight? Like, do you want food? Because at the end of the day, if you come to me as a 16-year-old and say, hey, if you're being trafficked, get help, I don't like affiliate myself with that term because I don't know what that term means, but also because even if I have heard of that term, my traffickers and the people in my life purposely made it not cross paths with me. And so it's kind of having to change your language, change your tone, but mostly change your language and how are you going to approach. And so if you said, hey, if you want free food tonight, like let's eat together and let's get free food together. And I think that can allow relationship building to happen way faster, but also help me realize like, hey, like, you notice something that maybe metaphorically I've been screaming for somebody to do and meet me where I'm at in that instance.
I love that. And I think so often I've heard well-meaning professionals say, oh no, they're not being trafficked. And I'm like, well, how do you know that? And they're like, well, I asked them. I'm like, what did you ask them? I said, are you being trafficked? And they said no. And I think that that's just so, it's again, well-meaning people who want to know if someone's being trafficked. But I wouldn't ever approach someone and ask them that. I think, meeting their needs, like you said, food, safety, shelter, clothing, water, just something that's going to give them a little comfort. I love that. That is such a great tip. Thank you for that.
I do want to add, I think it is hard, for service providers because, I think I was talking to Holly about this a while ago, but like the way people approach making friends is the same way, you were groomed. And so it's really hard, and it's very easy to say, okay, they don't need help, bye, and not go back. But if you continue this consistent, hey, like, if you're hungry next week, hey, if you're hungry, and it might be very redundant and repetitive, but I do believe that is also equivalent to consistency, and consistency is another way of building relationship. And so I do encourage, at least with teachers, like, if the kid says no, that they don't need new clothes, but it's obvious that they do, like, just keep asking every week, and sooner or later they will say yes. And that did happen with me. Like, sooner or later I did say, okay, yes, maybe I am doing a couple things that I should not be doing.
I think it goes back to what Norma said about traffickers meeting the needs of the victims. And so as a victim, if you've known that the trafficker was meeting your needs and now someone else is offering to meet your needs, there's that like hesitation to accept help. And I think we have to recognize that victims have a right to have that hesitation. Their trust has been taken away from them. So if they're not going to trust us in the beginning, that's their right. They're trying to protect themselves because they've been taken advantage of before. So that's a great reminder. All right, Yvonne, what are the services that are currently available to survivors in Palm Beach County, and what other services are needed?
Right now, there is actually a plethora of services in Palm Beach County for human traffic victims. Here at Catholic Charities, we assist with finding housing. We also provide gift cards as a form of financial assistance. There's medical services, the Guatemalan Center. There's other locations that provide free assistance for human traffic victims. If they're foreign nationals and they're minors, they also provide, it's easier for them to be able to receive access to the match grant and access to essentially the T visa, just because they're minors. They are treated more delicately and with more care. Here in Catholic Charities, we provide transportation, clothing, toiletries, therapy, and that's kind of the same thing there all over the county. There's providers that assist with counseling. There's providers that assist with all sorts of services, free legal services, Legal Aid of Palm Beach. There's several organizations that provide all sorts of services. Again, it's just tapping into the right case manager and tapping into the right location, being connected to the right people, and they'll provide the services to help that victim in all of their basic and essential needs.
So it sounds like there's not necessarily like a gap in services right now. It's more of just having the victims connect to those services. Right.
There actually is one specific gap that we have continuously seen, and we're doing all our efforts to close it. It's actually housing. Housing is the number one issue that we have had since we started this program, and it's the constant issue I find with other providers in common, that there's many times there's shelters for victims of violence, there's residential facilities for substance abuse, there's other facilities for all sorts of things, but because human trafficking is considered a relatively new crime, there isn't a specific free housing location where we can say, okay, come here, we're going to place you there. We have to kind of get creative and place them in hotels and place them in different locations and connect to different providers that give housing to victims. So if there's any providers out there listening to this, we're calling you out, for your assistance. If you would like to partner and cooperate with housing any human traffic victims.
And there's a lot of federal funding for that housing program. So if people are able to put together a established, well-run program for these survivors, there's funding available. So I think that's people don't often understand that the federal government has provided for a good 10 years now, more, pretty consistent funding for human trafficking services. So if you're out there and you think that you have the ability to put this type of program together, maybe you're running a similar shelter for other victims and you want to move into human trafficking, the money is there. So make sure you go out and search for that, because there's grants and funding available. And I agree,
Yes.
housing, I think, is consistently our struggle.
Yes, and we're actually working right now to partner with the Salvation Army. So it's just another great example to show how when we have someone that's willing, an organization that's willing and available, we're using our human trafficking funds and grants and everything to fund those providers so that they can partner with us. So the money is there, and we just need to get it more established. So.
And you mentioned minor foreign national victims and the ability for them to get services. And I, again, before I worked in this field, had no idea that this existed, that they can get temporary assistance and they can kind of get fast tracked for that T visa. And if you're not aware what a T visa is, it's actually for trafficking victims. It's different than a U visa, which is for crime victims. And from my understanding is that the T visa is very underutilized. And so people are often fearful about coming forward to report trafficking because of their status as maybe they're not legally here. But if you're coming forward as a victim and your trafficking case can be verified, there are avenues for you to get those T visas and services, and especially for minor foreign national victims, there's a lot of support and services available.
Yeah, like for minors, usually for the T visa, it would require for them to be confirmed human traffic victims, have maybe letters from PBSO or a lawyer. When you're a minor, you're automatically granted the eligibility letters that it would take in order for you to receive immediate services, food stamp assistance upon arrival to this country, cash assistance, Medicaid, medical care through the healthcare district. So there's a lot more. They take care a lot more of minors in this country that are human trafficked because they're so delicate. They're so much more vulnerable. They don't have parents and stuff. So.
Yeah, I know in different areas throughout South Florida, we see young people sent over for work, and maybe their family just can't take care of them back at their home country, or they think that there's this great opportunity in the United States. Do you see that happening in Palm Beach as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. I think that wherever there is a lot of agriculture or I think that just in general, wherever there's a big gap in when there's like what do you call it? An area where there's a lot of money, I believe that there is a lot of extortion there because there's room for it, and obviously in the agriculture community, and we see it a lot with maids or people taking care of kids or just anyone that's a foreign national or that looks like a minor where there's a vulnerability that is very clear. I think that there's definitely a possibility. There's higher possibilities for that area to be a lot of labor traffic victims for sure.
Yes, definitely. They're often hidden victims. Sometimes they're living in people's houses, taking care of their children, cleaning. Sometimes they're working in our, hotels, restaurants, massage parlors, nail salons. So as much as the focus lately has been on sex trafficking in the media, and we hear about these high profile cases, we can't forget that juveniles are also being trafficked through labor trafficking right here in Palm Beach County. And if you see something, please call the Human Trafficking Hotline. They do a great job of tracking. So you might not be the first person to call, and they do this great job of keeping those data points and being able to track victims, track traffickers and organizations. There's crime organizations sometimes involved in some of those bigger industries. So please give them a call. You never know how you could be helping by calling the trafficking helpline. Okay, so I'm going to move over to Norma. Norma, one of our therapists from Victim Services, how can therapy be beneficial to someone who has experienced trafficking, and how would they access the services?
Okay, well, the victims experience a lot of different symptoms. Some of them are emotional, psychological, even physical. They might feel guilty, they might have fears, shame, and also they have experienced post-traumatic stress and depression, anxiety, and also in difficulty in relationships. So what therapy does is help them with coping skills, teach them how to be able to feel better, reduce the trauma symptoms, teach them there's a lot of learning too, coping skills to be able to gain control of their life. So it's kind of rebuilding them, they're kind of broken, and we want to help them get back into who they really should be. And some of them, they're broken even before they get to become human traffickers, so because they were maybe depressed before, or maybe they had other issues before. So we deal with everything that has to do with the trauma, and we just help them with coping skills and anything that they need in order to gain control of their lives. And to access us, they can call the central office in the courthouse, the key service main office, and the number 561-355-2383. And they just need to say that they want therapy, and somebody will be reaching them and find out what their needs are, and then picking with the appropriate therapist. And right now, I'm the only Hispanic in the victim services, so I take all the Hispanic clients.
Great. And I think it's important for people to know too, with victim services, our services are always free and there's no timeline. So if you were trafficked 10 years ago and you have never spoken to anyone about that experience, I think sometimes people don't even realize what they went through was trafficking, and then hearing about the symptoms and hearing about how traffickers control their life, it kind of clicks in their mind like, oh my gosh, what I experienced 10 years ago, which I thought was only domestic violence, was actually trafficking. And they kind of need to speak to someone 10 years later, and that's okay. We want you to call, we want you to come forward and get that support. If that trauma is still impacting your life today, then we can definitely provide those therapy services for you. Like Norma said, she speaks Spanish. So if, language is not an issue, you can come and still receive the services through victim services. Callie, would you mind sharing a little bit about your personal healing journey and what services have actually been helpful for you?
So kind of like I mentioned in my introduction, healing is so hard. Whatever you're healing from, whether it's a breakup, divorce, trauma, whatever capacity of trauma it is so hard. And so one of the things that I realized over my 5 years of healing is that every day is a little unpredictable, but the more you kind of get a grip on what healing is, the more you can cope with whatever the day brings ahead of you. And so I've really had to learn that. And I know in the very, very, very beginning and when I first got out of the lifestyle, I really struggled staying out. And I think I had to go through that phase, and I had to just kind of learn. I had to learn on my own what was right, what was wrong, what was healthy, and what was not healthy. And I had to learn also that my unhealthy wants were valid because of everything that I've gone through, but there's also another way to go about a situation or an issue. And so it was a lot of cognitive rewiring of the brain, and it takes years, and there's still some things where I'm like, okay, I gotta like step back, rethink, rewire, redo. But I did actually go to a safe house down in Miami, and I lived there for a few months. And being able to live there, I was able to rest, I was able to sleep. And that's something that's very lacked in when you are being trafficked, or when you are being abused in general. So being able to just live there and have a spiritual rehabilitation, but also a lot of emotional rehabilitation, it genuinely saved my life. And I think one of the important phases in healing that I had to go through, and I'm still on that road to, is living independently, being able to take care of myself, and kind of catching up to all the things that I lacked, especially the ages that I was being abused. I was not learning the kind of the normal life skills that a 7 or 8 or 9 year old was learning. And so I kind of have to learn all of that now. And so I had to go through those stages as well. And every day is a challenge and it's different, but again, it's being able to have a support system. I know Holly's part of that support system where you're able to just say, hey, like randomly out of the blue, like, hey, I'm struggling, like I need to have the sounding board in this conversation to be able to think through something that I may even know the answer to, but I need to think through out loud, right? And so it's so important to have a good support system that will just wrap around you and say, hey, like on your good days, on your bad days, we'll celebrate, we'll struggle with you will do life with you. And so, again, being out 5 years, I've been in counseling for 3, and it's every week, and it's definitely one of those times where I'm like, I want to be busy on those scheduled times that I have counseling. But again, it's just knowing, like, committing to healing is one of the best self-love acts that you can do for yourself. And I think it's even that alone is something that I had to learn. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely a journey. It's definitely a journey.
I love that. Committing to healing is so important. I think for anyone, not even just trafficking survivors, but people that are struggling with abuse histories and sexual assault or domestic violence, or even just addiction, committing to healing, that is, you're moving along. When you make that commitment, as hard as it can be, that shows how far through your journey you are, that you've been able to commit to that. So that's amazing to hear. And I really appreciate you sharing that. Laura, our teenagers over the past few months have shown they can be very strong activists, that they can really make a difference in our world. What are some ways that they can get involved to prevent human trafficking?
Yeah, and I think it's been so impressive to see exactly how everyone has rallied, especially the young people. And just coming to this event today, I'm already just so proud of those of you that came, because I know it wasn't required, it was optional. And I think you've already kind of taken that first step, but it can't end here. This issue is always changing. All of us on this panel, we're always learning more about it. We're always having to stay up to date and adapt and kind of change our game plan based on what the issue looks like. So it's something that we have to always keep learning. So number one, I would say continued education. You're starting the school year. If you've got papers and projects and assignments where you have some flexibility, you can kind of pick the topic, choose human trafficking and do your research paper on that. Maybe you'll get to give a presentation to your class and educate your peers, specifically on even just how to be safe online. Teach your younger siblings. So much of the work that I do, I guess, is on the prevention side and preventing others from experiencing these horrific experiences that take place when you're being trafficked. And so there's resources. If you've got younger siblings, you can go online. NetSmarts is a great resource that I use a lot when I'm with young people. There's videos and little fun games you can have your younger siblings play to start the conversation. And parents, there's resources for you on there as well that will kind of teach the basic concepts and topics of how to be safe, how to protect ourselves, what to look for. Don't be afraid to start the conversations. We have to have these conversations. Playing a role in this issue could be as simple as when you see your peers sharing pictures, or, that you think probably that person in that picture didn't consent to having that, or maybe they sent that private, picture to their boyfriend and now the whole school is seeing it. By not passing that on, by telling a trusted adult, by reporting it, you can report it to the cybertipline.org. You're playing a role in possibly preventing that person, because we know that traffickers sometimes use these images and sexting to traffic and blackmail people into trafficking. And so if we're passing those images along, we're sharing them, we may be playing a role in the trafficking of another individual. And the other thing I want to say, just to keep in mind, is that sometimes there's things that we learn that we maybe a friend confides in us, or that we confide in a friend, that just someone else our age isn't equipped to handle. They don't know the resources and they don't necessarily know how to handle, because it's such a big issue or event or situation that's happened. So having a trusted adult that you can go to talk about that is really important, and that not necessarily our friends can help us or fix every situation. Sometimes it's too big for our friends. Finally, so prevention: educate yourself, educate others. You can get involved in campaigns, whether it's writing letters to your representatives and your senators on issues and legislation that is related to human trafficking, or maybe it's doing a drive, collecting items for Catholic Charities to give to survivors, or doing a fundraiser, things like that. Support all the great efforts taking place in our county. And I'm really proud to say that all these agencies in our county, at least, work really closely together and have that collaboration. So if you have an idea of a way you could, support any of those efforts, like I said, it could be a drive at your school, a fundraiser, a birthday party, kind of GoFundMe, whatever it is, you're playing a really important role in allowing people like Yvonne and Holly and Callie to do the work that they do to really help those who have been trafficked, or those who are very much at risk of trafficking. So don't think just because you're young that you don't have a role here. We do need you, and you absolutely have a role in this fight against human trafficking.
Yeah, I love all of that. I think especially right now, usually we say school counselors or teachers might be a safe person for young people to go to, but they're not in school, right? So know that your friends and peers are talking to one another. And if you hear your friends talking about something and you have concerns, talk about it with them. Don't shun them for it. Don't, belittle them for it. Talk to them, voice your concerns to your friends. And if they don't hear you, maybe that is the time that you go to a trusted adult. We really are empowering young people. If you want to be a part of this fight, come join us. We know that you all know more than us. You know what's happening online. Every time I do a presentation in a high school, I have at least one student come up to me and talk about one of their friends that's possibly being groomed. So you all know that this is happening, and you know the signs better than we do. You've seen on Instagram, you see it on Snapchat, you see it on TikTok. Please let us know if you suspect something. Yvonne, so this kind of leads into the next question. If a teenager suspects that their friend is being groomed or recruited, what can they do?
It would pretty much be the same. I would just advise them always just to not stay quiet. I think the number one temptation is to just stay quiet but out of it. But I think you have to be the opposite. You have to be bold enough to step in and try and befriend that person and try and ask them if they need anything, the way Kelly said, and just be willing to not judge them and ask them if there's anything going on in their life and why their clothes looks that way and why they're feeling that way maybe, and just not staying quiet about it, not staying quiet, calling the National Human Trafficking Hotline, telling teachers, talking to that friend, telling their parents, it doesn't matter where you report to, as long as you report to someone, as long as you say to someone, hey, I have this concern, and I don't think that they can make it on their own. They can fight out of it on their own. So it's just that battle buddy system. Just don't stay quiet, tell someone.
Absolutely. And you said not judging them. I think affirming to your friend that they're worthy, they have value. I think sometimes, individuals, especially young people, have low self-esteem and they don't see that in themselves, and they need to hear it from other people, and that they are worth more than this that they're experiencing right now, and that they can, have the life that they want, and they can get the support that they need. I kind of ruined this for you. Go ahead, Yvonne.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Many times just hearing that enough, eventually they're going to start believing it, and sometimes that's what it takes for them to be able to understand that, it's not their fault. They don't deserve this. Maybe, maybe there is another way out. Maybe someone can be strong enough to help them against these really evil people around me. They're taking advantage of me. So, yeah.
Yes, giving them strength that's already inside of them, and letting them know that it's there and they can use it.
Yes.
All right, Laura, I kind of already ruined this for you, but can you talk about some of the social media platforms that teenagers are being recruited from?
Absolutely. So I see TikTok, of course, popping up in a lot of the cases, just across all the United States, not just in Florida. I've seen Instagram, Kik are also mentioned in quite a few cases. And just, keep in mind on any of these apps, there's people from all over using them. So it's important to be aware that some people on there are there for the sole purpose of abusing or trafficking or exploiting young people. And it's not always easy to tell who is who, and, who really has, poor intentions, and who they say they are, whose profile is legit. Also keep in mind, I know sometimes young people are on dating apps, and those tend to sometimes have predators on there as well, specifically targeting minors. Chatting platforms like on video games, sometimes, we want to play with people through those gaming systems, and the predators and traffickers could be on those chatting platforms. And also any other type of messaging app can be used to recruit people into trafficking. So if you can think of it, it's probably been used before. And so that's where, as parents, it's important to talk to your kids, just basic I mean, I always push for online safety, but, you know, privacy settings and the importance of keeping your accounts private. You know, when I first got all these accounts as a kid, my parents didn't teach me how to make safe passwords. And I was probably really at risk of being hacked because I didn't have that skill, or I didn't think it was important. And maybe some accounts were left public, and then I didn't know who was seeing what. And just as simple as, you know, posting a picture of myself in my high school t-shirt tells people what school I go to. And that might be cool for friends and family to know, but maybe we don't want the whole world to know. So kind of thinking through some of those, you know, basic online safety concept and skills can really help protect our young people and, you know, the teens out there, just keeping in mind that, you know, who you think, who they look like in a profile or who they say they are, doesn't mean that's who they are. And when I used to do a lot of groups in education with teens, and I'd ask them, how do you know who you're talking to is really who they are? And they'd say, oh, based on their profile picture. And I would laugh and say, what is that? That's nothing. You can make a squirrel be your profile picture. Like that doesn't prove anything. So just keeping that in mind. And lastly, I think sometimes on apps that allow you to post anonymous content, sometimes or content where it disappears after some period of time, sometimes it feels safer to be on those because people don't know who I am, or, you know, the picture will go away after a couple seconds. There's still risks there, and there's still ways people can take that information, even if it's just briefly posted, and use it to harm us. So don't let your guard down, I guess I would say, on platforms where maybe you can post anonymously or the content will disappear quickly.
Laura, before we let you go, can you just briefly give us some updates on the Human Trafficking Coalition, like the next meeting? And I'm going to go ahead and post the Google form for them to fill out.
Absolutely. So the coalition in Palm Beach County, we meet monthly, and we're just a collection of agencies, individuals, law enforcement, effective services. We're all kind of come together each month to continue learning and networking about human trafficking. So every month we have an amazing speaker that will talk on some aspect of trafficking. So we're always kind of expanding our knowledge base. And we meet the second Wednesday of every month, which I believe is September 9th, is the next one at 10 a.m. And right now it's virtual. So you can join from wherever you are, just get on Zoom. If you fill out the link that Holly's posting, it's just a one-time thing you'll fill out. We'll send you the Zoom link probably like the week before the meeting so you can get on and join us. And it's free. You can just, whoever's interested to come, whether you're an adult or a kid, if you got a break during your school day, you're welcome to come. And it's a great way to continue to have these conversations. And I believe next month we're talking about the role of substance use and drugs and kind of trends in drug use and how that plays a role with the issue of human trafficking, a very big kind of connection there between those two issues.
Great, thank you. Yes, I posted the Googled form for everyone to fill out if they're interested. All right, so Callie, you know, we often talk about human trafficking as something that happens like out there in the world. But knowing your journey and knowing what you've experienced in your life, you've talked about how home was not a safe place for you. What advice would you give to a teenager who may be experiencing an unsafe home environment right now?
Yeah, that is a really good question. And I guess to talk really more directly to those who are watching, you know, number one, it is so important to realize that searching for love or searching for something that you are lacking at home or in a relationship is not bad. That is not wrong to do. And I think sometimes when we get a negative outcome, we think, okay, what we did was wrong. And so I think the very first thing I want to like reiterate maybe 50 times if we have the time, but you know, all joking aside, but just to reiterate that it is not wrong to search for what you don't have in your personal life. And with that being said, if you do find yourself in a situation where you are dating a guy or girl that may not be the most healthiest, or they turned out not to be the person that you really liked, or whoever you're living with at home is, you know, there's abuse going on in there, I think it's really important to kind of search for somebody safe. And so to kind of just really quickly share a personal story of mine, I was trafficked from when I was 7 years old to 17. So it was my whole entire school time. Like the whole entire time I was in elementary, middle, and high school, I was being trafficked. And so the one thing that I did, which, and it sounds silly, but what I did was I actually searched online, like I searched what I was lacking. So I felt like I couldn't be loved. So I searched, how to be lovable, right? And so I ended up YouTubing that, and I did actually end up finding a girl who at that time, and I did not know, because she was in South Africa. She was born and raised in Miami. So long story short, like I did actually end up reaching out to her, and I said, hey, like, is it possible to be loved and whatnot? And so being able to find a safe person, and even and I think I do want to say, like, especially from my example, like the person that I did talk to did end up being safe, but I did not know her like ins and outs. But being able to say, okay, like, can I ask somebody for help outside of the people that I am being abused by? And that does take a bold step for you to do. And it is uncertain. Like knowing, okay, if I go to this person, are they actually going to help me, or are they going to exploit me again? And so just being able to have that bold step and saying, okay, like if I go to, let's say, Palm Beach Victim Services, number one, like, I mean, I don't know all the logistics when it does come to reporting with them, but being able to say, hey, like, I do need help. I don't want to talk about it, but I do need help, right? And being able to do that can help you realize, like, even if you do have to go home that night, let's say, that you do have one person in this world that does care. And I think being able to have that mindset too, of saying, okay, like every single person in my life right now seems like they don't care about me, but there has to be one. The possibilities scientifically, there has to be one person that will agree with you, right? And so being able to say, okay, I need to go find that one person, and making your own personal mission to say, I'm going to find that one person that will help me. And it might be somebody that I have no idea who they are, but they are much safer than the people abusing me. Because I know a lot of times, when we go to school and when we have events like this, um it's very common for people to say, hey, go to your parents if something's happening, right? And a lot of times our parents are the ones who are abusing us. And for me, my whole entire abuse was my parents. And so at times I did go to my parents about the abuse that was happening, and unfortunately that did not end well. But I do, again, to reiterate, there is somebody out there that wants to help, even if it's a hotline. Even I know when I was a kid, I did the national suicide hotline all the time. Like I messaged in with their live chat, and it was just having company, having somebody with me that time. So being able to just know that, like, you have, like, there's nothing that you did that you can change at this point, and there's nothing that somebody else did to you that you can change at this point. But knowing that right now, at this point and this point and forward, you have the ability to change something, and that's changing what you are going through internally and also physically in the environment that you're in. But that is my advice.
That's beautiful. And I think I've never heard someone put it that way, that when you are looking for something that you're not getting at home, that's nothing wrong, because that's so true. If you're not getting love at home, of course you're going to go looking for it somewhere else. There's nothing wrong with you, and it shouldn't stop looking for that love. That's so important.
I don't think a lot of us are told that, because again, like I said before, when you have a negative outcome in what you are trying to do, you tend to automatically say, okay, I did something wrong. And then when you have that mindset of, okay, I did something wrong, you're subconsciously or intentionally going to be like, I don't deserve to get out, I don't deserve to ask for help, and I don't know how to go to someone and be like, ah, crap, I accidentally talked to a stranger today because I wanted love. But if you focus on, okay, you wanted something that even animals, my cats want love all the freaking time. It's not every single breathing thing wants nurture and love. And to be able to just embrace that and say, okay, like, I was not in the wrong for wanting love or
Right.
food or shelter or safety.
Absolutely. And I think, again, it goes back to reminding us all that the traffickers are the ones in the wrong, that they're taking advantage of your natural desire to want love. Too often we put the blame on victims, when in reality, they did nothing wrong. They're trying to live and survive. I think an important thing we always say at Victim Services is to start by believing. And when Callie's talking about how victims should find that one person to trust, well, remember, if you're that person, someone comes to you for support, start by believing them. Start by taking their situation seriously. Ask them how you can help. Too often, I think we're fearful of getting involved. We look the other way. We say, I don't want to hear about that. we need to be stronger. We need to be those bystanders and be the person and step up to the plate for survivors and victims and be strong for them and believe them and support them, because we've seen, and there's research that shows, the more times a victim goes to someone and that person believes them and supports them, the more likely to later report to law enforcement, get the services that they need. It's all, leads to the same end goal. At Victim Services, of course, if someone's under the age of 18, we're mandated reporters. We do have to report to law enforcement. But anyone over the age of 18, it's their choice whether or not they want to report to law enforcement. So if an adult, again, has experienced this as a child or younger in their life and they want services, they can come and access our services even without a police report. So that's for our adults. That's all the questions that we did have for today. I do want to remind everyone the Human Trafficking Hotline is 888-373-7888. Please call at any time. It's available 24/7. Just a reminder, 4 o'clock tomorrow, we are doing with Palm Beach County Behavioral Health Coalition a Wednesday webinar on consent. So if you're interested in joining us for that, you can text PREP, P-R-E-P, to 888-111. And then Thursday, we're going to watch the Audrey and Daisy documentary. So we're actually asking people to watch it ahead of time. It's on Netflix. Everybody has their Netflix account or they steal it from their parents. You can watch Audrey and Daisy tonight or tomorrow night. And then Thursday, join us on Facebook Live at 7 o'clock. We're going to have a discussion with Pace Center for Girls, AVDA, and Palm Beach County Victim Services about teen sexual assault. We earlier in this discussion talked about images of people being sent without their consent, and that's involved in that documentary as well. It is very impactful. It does talk about sexual violence and suicide. So if you need support, call 211 at any time. And we are here for you as well at Victim Services. Our 24/7 helpline is 561-833-7273. I don't know how I'm keeping all these numbers straight in my head. I didn't write those down anywhere. So that concludes our event. I want to thank Norma so much. Thank you for coming on, Laura, Yvonne, and Callie. I greatly appreciate you all joining me today. Like I said, we're going to post this on our YouTube page, so I'll make sure everybody has the link. And if anyone ever has any questions or needs anything, please feel free to reach out to one of us. Thank you all so much.